In its first breakthrough since easing restrictions on arms exports in 2014, Japan signed a deal to sell $100 million worth of advanced air surveillance radars to the Philippines. These radars, fixed and mobile, are built by Japan's Mitsubishi Electric Corporation, MELCO, one of Japan's 5 leading defense production companies. MELCO has signed a contract with the Philippine Defense Ministry for the radars, which will reportedly be used for detecting stealth fighter planes and missiles. China is the obvious focus. Tokyo has previously supplied defense-related equipment such as patrol boats to Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam and the Philippines. This was part of Japan's Official Development Assistance (ODA) under its Capacity Building program, advancing a Japanese narrative driven by proactive contribution to peace. Although donated to the coast guards of the recipient nations, the boats are defense-related products. As one analyst noted, the provision of patrol vessels to the Philippines and Vietnam has a military dimension, even if the official statements declare differently. Tokyo has also provided TC-90 training planes to the Philippines military and trained Philippine naval pilots to fly the aircraft. In 2014, Japan introduced a revised set of 3 principles on transfer of defense equipment and technology, and in 2015 a new development cooperation charter that gives ODA strategic edge. Even before these changes, Tokyo provided ODA loans to Indonesia to purchase patrol vessels for the prevention of piracy, maritime terrorism and proliferation of weapons. Strictly speaking, these vessels do fall under the definition of arms, but the conditions of sale made them appear to be for purely civilian purposes. Japan's earlier attempts to sell military wares abroad either failed or remain under negotiation. Tokyo's bid to sell its Soryu-class submarines to Australia reached the final stage, but in 2016 the Australian government awarded the multi-billion-dollar contract to France. This was a huge disappointment to Japan, as the deal would have been a game-changer for its defense industry. For the last few years, Japan has been in negotiation with India to sell its US-2 amphibian search and rescue aircraft made by Shin Meiwa and used by Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force. The deal progressed almost to completion 2 years ago, and in a 2018 joint statement the 2 prime ministers stated that the 2 sides will continue to make efforts with regard to cooperation on US-2 amphibian aircraft. But the proposal has since stalled, reportedly due to reasons of cost and disagreement over technology transfer. The deal seems to be off the table for now, as top leaders of the 2 nations have not discussed it in recent meetings. Tokyo was also in discussion with Britain to sell P-1 submarine hunting aircraft made by Japan's Kawasaki Heavy Industries, the first such proposal outside of the Indo-Pacific region. But this also ended in failure. Japan's failures in Australia, India, the United Kingdom and other countries can be ascribed to many factors, from the inexperience of Japanese defense-related companies in the international arms market to the lack of comparative advantage and capacity. Japanese arms are not combat tested, as most Japanese producers sell their military wares to Japan's self-defense forces, which is not a combat force. Some Japanese companies are also reluctant to aggressively pursue arms sales in the international market because it is not their core business and they don't want to be labeled as merchants of death in the eyes of the Japanese public. Regional maritime security and safety is one of the major goals of Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific vision. Southeast Asian nations, many of which face China's increasing military assertiveness in the South China Sea, are recipients of Japan's assistance for building surveillance capacity. Securing its first arms deal in Southeast Asia with the Philippines is a landmark development. The deal shows Japan's diplomatic acumen in dealing with Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, who is wary of the United States and eager for a close relationship with China. In 2016, the Duterte administration ignored the rulings of the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague that recognized virtually all of the Philippines' claims in the South China Sea. The same administration has now been persuaded by Tokyo, a U.S. ally and competitor of China, to equip itself with surveillance radars to keep a closer eye on China's military activity around the Philippine coastline. This deal has given substance to the Abe government's 2016 agreement with the Philippines on the transfer of defense equipment and technology. This was a first step in the former Abe administration's larger plan to make Japan an arms exporting country by revising the 3 principles on arms exports in 2014. New Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga is likely to follow this course as evidenced by his first overseas trip to Vietnam and Indonesia, but any large deals seem a ways off. Japanese manufacturers first need to upscale and vigorously pursue the international market. This is unlikely in the near future, as Japanese companies remain sensitive to public sentiments that largely oppose Japan's arms exports.